Chapter 1. The Mysterious Encounter. The frontier planet of Zorith wasn't much to look at, a barren world of endless dusty plains, jagged rock formations, and occasional clusters of thorny vegetation clinging to survival under the relentless glare of twin suns. To most of the galaxy, it was just another backwater planet, forgotten by the Galactic Union and left to rot in the shadow of its more prosperous neighbors. For Jason Harker, it was a temporary refuge. Jason's ship, the Odyssey, sat parked near the rusting remains of an ancient mining outpost. The vessel was a patchwork of salvaged parts, held together more by Jason's sheer will than proper engineering. The ship, like its owner, had seen better days. Once a decorated soldier in the Union Marines, Jason had left the military after a disastrous mission that had cost him his squad. Now, he wandered the frontier planets, scavenging what he could and staying out of trouble, or at least trying to. The morning had been uneventful, as most days on Zorith were. Jason had spent hours combing through the wreckage of a derelict transport ship, hoping to find something of value. Most of it was junk scrap metal, corroded wiring, and broken machinery, but he had managed to salvage a few energy cells that might still have some charge left. As the twin suns dipped lower in the sky, painting the barren landscape in shades of orange and red, Jason decided to head back to his ship. The days on Zorith were scorching, but the nights were brutally cold. He slung his pack over his shoulder, its contents clinking softly with each step, and began the long trek across the plains. The trouble began as Jason neared a rocky outcropping that jutted out of the desert like a jagged scar. He had passed this spot before, a natural landmark that served as a waypoint on his scavenging routes. But tonight, something was different. He heard a sound. It was faint, almost lost in the whisper of the evening wind, but it was there, a soft, plaintive cry. Jason froze, his instincts kicking in. His hand drifted to the sidearm holstered at his hip, a battered but reliable plasma pistol. He scanned the area, his sharp blue eyes narrowing as he strained to locate the source of the sound. Another cry, louder this time. It was high-pitched and trembling, filled with a sense of desperation that made Jason's stomach tighten. It sounded human, but that didn't make sense. As far as he knew, there were no other humans on Zorith. Cautiously, he approached the outcropping, his pistol drawn and his senses on high alert. The cry came again, leading him to a narrow crevice between two massive slabs of rock. He hesitated, his mind racing with possibilities. It could be a trap. Zorith wasn't entirely uninhabited, and the few sentients who did live here weren't exactly friendly. But there was something about the sound, something so raw and pleading that Jason couldn't ignore it. With a deep breath, he edged into the crevice, his boots crunching softly against the rocky ground. The passage was tight, forcing him to turn sideways to squeeze through. The light from the setting suns cast long, flickering shadows on the walls, and Jason's pulse quickened as he moved deeper into the narrow space. Finally, he emerged into a small, sheltered alcove, and his breath caught in his throat. She was curled up against the far wall, her small, delicate frame trembling with fear. Her skin was a pale lavender, smooth and faintly luminous in the dim light. Her eyes, large, luminous, and shimmering like pools of liquid silver, were wide with terror as they locked onto him. A pair of frayed, tattered garments clung to her slight form, and her bare feet were caked with dust and blood. Jason lowered his pistol slowly, his voice soft and calm. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The girl didn't respond, her body tense and coiled like a cornered animal. Jason took a cautious step closer, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. He could see now that her wrists were raw and bruised, as if she had been bound tightly. Her face was gaunt, her cheeks hollow from malnourishment. "What happened to you?" Jason asked gently, his heart sinking as he took in her condition. "How did you end up here?" Still, no response. Her eyes darted to the plasma pistol at his side, and Jason realized she was too frightened to focus on anything else. Slowly, he unholstered the weapon and placed it on the ground, sliding it away from them both. "There. No weapon," he said. "Just me. You're safe now." The girl's breathing slowed slightly, though she still watched him warily. Jason crouched down to her level, keeping his movements slow and deliberate. He rummaged through his pack and pulled out a water canister, holding it out to her. "Here," he said. "You look like you need this more than I do." For a moment, she didn't move. Then, cautiously, she reached out with a trembling hand and took the canister. Jason noticed that her fingers were slender and clawed, each tip ending in a delicate, curved talon. She brought the canister to her lips and drank greedily, spilling some of the water in her haste. "Easy," Jason said, his voice soft. "You'll make yourself sick if you drink too fast." She lowered the canister, her silver eyes meeting his. For the first time, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. Thank you." Jason felt a surge of relief. "You're welcome. Can you tell me your name?" There was a pause, and then she said, "Celera?" "Celera," Jason repeated. "I'm Jason. Do you know where you are?" She shook her head, her expression lost. I don't know. I was taken. They hurt me. I escaped, but I don't know where to go." Jason's jaw tightened. He didn't need to ask who they were. There were plenty of slavers and smugglers who operated in the shadows of the galaxy, preying on the weak and vulnerable. The bruises on her wrists told him all he needed to know. "You're safe now," Jason said firmly. "I'll get you out of here." Celera looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "Why? Why would you help me?" Jason hesitated, then shrugged. "Because someone has to." The journey back to the Odyssey was slow and tense. Celera was weak, her steps faltering as Jason guided her across the rugged terrain. He kept a watchful eye on their surroundings, his pistol at the ready in case of trouble. The suns had dipped below the horizon by the time they reached his ship, and the temperature had dropped sharply. Jason led Celera up the boarding ramp and into the cramped but functional interior of the Odyssey. The ship was a mess of salvaged parts and makeshift repairs, but it was home. He set her down on the bench in the main cabin and retrieved a medkit from a nearby storage locker. "Let me take a look at those wrists," he said. Celera flinched as he reached for her, but she didn't pull away. Jason worked carefully, cleaning and bandaging the raw wounds. Her claws twitched slightly as he worked, but she didn't complain. "There," he said, tying off the last bandage. "Not perfect, but it'll do for now." Celera looked at him with an intensity that made him feel suddenly self-conscious. "You are different," she said softly. "Not like the others." Jason frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, her silver eyes glimmering. "You'll understand soon enough." As Jason set a course to leave Zorith, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Celera's story than she was letting on. She was grateful, yes, but there was a weight to her gaze, a burden she seemed reluctant to share. Still, he told himself it didn't matter. He had saved her, and that was enough. Or so he thought. Jason had no idea that the truth about Celera would turn his entire world upside down. Chapter 2. Secrets in the Stars. The Odyssey hummed softly as it drifted through hyperspace, the swirling blue energy of the tunnel casting faint light across the ship's cramped interior. Jason Harker leaned back in the pilot's seat, his mind racing as he glanced at the navigation screen. He had plotted a course to a neutral trading post on the edge of the Tauros system, a place he hoped would offer medical supplies, food, and answers about Celera. The girl sat silently in the co-pilot's chair, her silver eyes fixed on the hypnotic blur of hyperspace outside the viewport. Jason tried to focus on his instruments, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something about Celera didn't add up. Her fear and injuries were real enough, but the way she carried herself, the cautious precision of her movements, the way her gaze seemed to pierce through him suggested a deeper story. Finally, he broke the silence. "Celera, I need you to tell me what's really going on. Who took you? Why were they after you?" She turned to him slowly, her expression unreadable. "I told you, I was taken by slavers. They wanted me for reasons I do not fully understand." Jason frowned. Slavers don't usually operate without a plan. They had to have a reason. Celera hesitated, her hands curling into fists on her lap. "There are things about me that are difficult to explain. I was taught never to speak of them, for my safety and the safety of those around me." Jason sighed, running a hand through his short, disheveled hair. "Look, I don't mean to pry, but if someone's chasing you, I need to know why. If I'm going to protect you, I have to know what I'm up against. Solara's gaze softened slightly. You have already done more for me than I could have hoped for. I do not wish to burden you further. It's not a burden, Jason said firmly. It's survival. For both of us. For a moment, Solara seemed to wrestle with an internal conflict. Then, finally, she spoke. I am not ordinary. My kind possesses abilities that most would not understand. The ones who took me sought to exploit these abilities, to turn me into a weapon. Jason's brow furrowed. Abilities? Like what? Solara hesitated again, then raised her hand. A soft, silvery light emanated from her palm, spreading outward in gentle waves. The glow bathed the cockpit in an otherworldly radiance, and Jason felt a strange sensation wash over him, warmth, calm, and an overwhelming sense of clarity, as if his mind had been cleared of all doubt. Whoa, he muttered, staring at her hand. What? What is that? It is a gift, Solara said quietly. A gift my people have long kept hidden. We call it the Solara, the light within. It allows us to heal, to calm, and to protect. But in the wrong hands. Her voice trailed off, her silver eyes darkening. It can be twisted into something terrible. Jason sat back, his mind reeling. He had seen a lot in his time as a soldier, advanced technology, alien races with extraordinary abilities, but nothing like this. The power Solara had just demonstrated was unlike anything he had encountered, and he understood immediately why others might want to exploit it. And the slavers? He asked after a moment. They wanted to use this power for themselves? Solara nodded. They were not ordinary slavers. They worked for an organization, one that seeks to control beings like me. I do not know their name, but they are vast and powerful. They have agents in every corner of the galaxy. Jason's jaw tightened. Great. So now we're on their radar. As they emerged from hyperspace near the Tauros system, Jason's unease only grew. The trading post, known as Argus Station, was a sprawling hub of commerce and smuggling built into the remains of a massive asteroid. Its corridors were a maze of shops, cantinas, and shady backrooms, frequented by every type of traveler from merchants to bounty hunters. Jason guided the Odyssey into one of the station's docking bays, his eyes scanning for any signs of trouble. Stay close, he said to Solara as they disembarked. Places like this aren't exactly safe, especially for someone like you. Solara nodded, her movements cautious as she followed him into the station. The air was thick with the smell of engine grease and stale alcohol, and the noise was a constant hum of conversation and shouting. Jason kept one hand near his holstered pistol, his senses on high alert. Their first stop was a supply vendor, where Jason purchased medical packs, rations, and spare parts for the Odyssey. The vendor, a wiry alien with 3 eyes and a sharp tongue, eyed Solara curiously but said nothing. Jason paid quickly and moved on, unwilling to linger. It wasn't until they entered a quiet corner of the station that things took a turn. Jason Harker, a voice called out, low and dangerous. Jason froze, his hand instinctively going to his pistol. He turned to see a tall figure step out of the shadows, a man dressed in sleek black armor, his face obscured by a helmet. 2 more figures flanked him, both armed with plasma rifles. Who's asking? Jason said, his voice steady despite the tension crackling in the air. The man removed his helmet, revealing a sharp, angular face with cold, calculating eyes. The name's Thaler. I work for people who are very interested in your companion. Jason moved slightly to shield Solara. I don't know what you're talking about. Thaler smirked. Let's not play games, Harker. We know who she is and what she can do. Hand her over, and we might let you walk away. Jason's grip on his pistol tightened. Not happening. Thaler sighed, his expression hardening. I was hoping you'd cooperate. But if you insist on being difficult. He gestured, and the 2 armed men raised their rifles. Jason didn't hesitate. He grabbed Solara's arm and pulled her behind cover just as the first plasma bolt streaked past his head. Stay down, he shouted, drawing his pistol and returning fire. The narrow corridor erupted into chaos as energy blasts ricocheted off the walls. Jason moved with the precision of a seasoned soldier, his shots forcing the attackers to take cover. Celera crouched beside him, her silver eyes wide with fear. "Jason, I dash." "Not now," he barked. "Just stay out of sight." The fight was brutal and fast-paced. Jason managed to take down one of the armed men, but Thaler was relentless, his shots dangerously accurate. Jason knew they couldn't hold out for long, not without backup or a way to escape. Then, to his shock, Celera stood. "What are you doing?" Jason yelled, reaching for her, but she stepped into the open, her hands raised. The silvery light of her Solara power flared, filling the corridor with a blinding radiance. Thaler and his remaining man stumbled back, shielding their eyes as the light pulsed with a force that sent them sprawling. When the light faded, Thaler was unconscious, his armor scorched and his weapon lying useless on the ground. Jason stared at Celera, his chest heaving. What the hell was that? Solara's expression was unreadable. I didn't mean to hurt them, but I couldn't let them take us." Jason shook his head, his mind racing. "We need to get out of here. Now." As they fled back to the Odyssey, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that things had just gone from bad to worse. Solara's powers were incredible, but they also made her a target, one that dangerous people would stop at nothing to capture. And as he glanced at her, he realized the truth he had been trying to ignore. He wasn't just protecting a helpless girl. He was caught in something far bigger than himself, and the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. Chapter 3. The Truth Revealed. The Odyssey rocketed away from Argus Station, its engines straining under the stress of Jason's hasty departure. The cockpit was silent except for the hum of the ship's systems, but the tension between its two occupants was palpable. Jason gripped the controls tightly, his jaw clenched as he replayed the chaotic events at the station. Celera sat in the co-pilot's seat, her silver eyes cast downward, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "What the hell happened back there?" Jason finally asked, his voice sharp. Celera didn't respond immediately, her gaze fixed on her trembling hands. "I didn't mean to hurt them," she said quietly, "but I had to stop them." "You stopped them all right," Jason said, glancing at her. "You practically turned that corridor into a war zone." "I need to know what's going on, Celera. No more half-truths." Celera sighed, her shoulders slumping. "You deserve the full truth, but it's complicated." Jason leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "I've got time." Celera closed her eyes, taking a deep breath before she began. "My people, the Saranthii, are a peaceful race. We've always lived in isolation, hidden from the rest of the galaxy. The Solara, the light you saw, is a gift that all Saranthii possess. It connects us to the energy of the universe, allowing us to heal, calm, and protect." Jason nodded slowly, his expression skeptical but attentive. "Sounds like a pretty handy gift. Why hide it?" "Because it can also be used to destroy," Celera said, her voice tinged with sadness. "In the wrong hands, the Solara can become a weapon of unimaginable power. That's why the Saranthii have always kept to ourselves, avoiding contact with other species. But not everyone agrees with our ways." Jason frowned. "Let me guess someone decided they wanted to use this power for themselves." Celera nodded. "A faction within our own people betrayed us. They sold our secrets to an organization called the Nexus Consortium. The Consortium is ruthless. They control black markets, research labs, even entire planetary governments. They see the Saranthii as tools, resources to be exploited." Jason let out a low whistle. "And I'm guessing that's where the slavers come in?" "Yes," Celera said, her voice trembling. "They were working for the Consortium. They raided my village, taking anyone they could capture. I escaped, but not before I saw what they did to my family, my friends, everyone I've ever known." Jason's chest tightened as he saw the pain in her eyes. "I'm sorry, Celera. No one should have to go through that." She looked at him, her gaze filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you. But there's more you need to know." Jason raised an eyebrow. "More?" "The Consortium isn't just after any Saranthii," Celera said. "They're after me specifically. My Solara is different, stronger, more volatile. They believe I'm the key to unlocking the full potential of our power." Jason's blood ran cold. So, what? They want to turn you into some kind of superweapon? Celera nodded. And they'll stop at nothing to get me. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Jason leaned forward, resting his elbows on the console as he processed everything. He had saved Celera because it was the right thing to do, but now he realized just how deep he was in. The Nexus Consortium was no small-time operation. They were a galactic power, capable of crushing anyone who stood in their way. What do we do now? Jason asked finally. I don't know, Celera admitted. I've been running for so long, I don't even know where to go anymore. Jason's mind raced as he considered their options. They couldn't go to the Galactic Union. The consortium's influence likely extended there as well, and hiding on some remote planet would only delay the inevitable. Then, an idea struck him. What about your people? Are there any Saranthii left who can help? Celera hesitated, her expression conflicted. There's one place. A sanctuary hidden deep in the Zevran Nebula. My people built it as a last resort, a place to flee if we were ever discovered. But I don't know if anyone is still there. It's worth a shot, Jason said. If we can find your sanctuary, maybe we can figure out a way to fight back. Solara's eyes widened slightly. You would risk that for me? Jason shrugged. I've already stuck my neck out this far. Might as well see it through. A small smile crossed her lips. Thank you, Jason. You have no idea how much this means to me. Jason set a course for the Zevran Nebula, the journey taking them through uncharted regions of space. The Odyssey was pushed to its limits, its aging systems groaning under the strain. But Jason kept the ship steady, his focus unwavering. As the days passed, he and Celera grew closer. Despite the danger they faced, there were moments of levity, sharing stories of their pasts, joking about the quirks of the Odyssey, and even cooking questionable meals from the ship's dwindling supplies. Jason found himself admiring Solara's resilience. She had endured so much, yet her spirit remained unbroken. But the closer they got to the Zevran Nebula, the more Jason's unease grew. The Nexus Consortium wouldn't let them escape without a fight, and he knew their journey wouldn't end without bloodshed. Their arrival at the Zevran Nebula was both awe-inspiring and ominous. The nebula was a swirling expanse of vibrant colors, its glowing clouds pulsing with energy. Jason piloted the Odyssey carefully, following Solara's guidance as they navigated the treacherous currents. There, Celera said, pointing to a faint signal on the ship's sensors. That should be the sanctuary's entrance. Jason adjusted their course, bringing the ship toward a massive asteroid shrouded in the nebula's glow. As they approached, the asteroid's surface shimmered, revealing a hidden structure, a vast, crystalline dome embedded within the rock. You weren't kidding about hiding, Jason muttered, impressed. The Odyssey docked at a small hangar bay, its engines powering down with a hiss. Jason and Celera disembarked, stepping into the quiet, ethereal halls of the sanctuary. The air was cool and faintly charged, the walls glowing softly with an otherworldly light. But the sanctuary was empty. Hello? Celera called, her voice echoing through the corridors. Is anyone here? There was no response, only the faint hum of the structure's systems. Jason placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. We'll figure this out, Celera. Let's look around. As they explored the sanctuary, they found signs of recent activity, half-eaten rations, footprints in the dust, and faint traces of Solara energy lingering in the air. But there were no people, no Saranthii to greet them. Jason's unease deepened as they entered the central chamber. It was a grand hall filled with crystalline structures, each one pulsating faintly. In the center stood a massive console, its interface glowing with alien symbols. This place wasn't abandoned, Jason said. Someone was here recently. Celera approached the console, her hands trembling as she activated it. The crystals around them flared to life, projecting holographic images of Saranthii fleeing from ships marked with the Nexus Consortium's insignia. They found us, Celera whispered, her voice breaking. The Consortium found the sanctuary. Jason clenched his fists. Then we'll make sure they don't destroy what's left. But before he could say more, an alarm blared. and the hologram shifted to display a fleet of ships emerging from the nebula's edge. The Nexus Consortium had found them again. Chapter 4. The Final Stand. The sanctuary's walls glowed faintly, reacting to the proximity of the approaching Nexus fleet. Jason stared at the holographic display, his chest tightening as he counted the ships, a dozen sleek, heavily armed frigates and one massive cruiser at the center, its hull bristling with weaponry. "They're not wasting time," Jason muttered, his voice tight. "They're bringing everything they've got." Celera stood beside him, her silver eyes locked on the projection. Her hands trembled, but she took a deep breath, steadying herself. "We can't let them destroy this place. It's all that's left of my people." Jason nodded, his mind already racing through possible strategies. "The sanctuary's got to have defenses. Can we use them?" Celera approached the central console, her fingers gliding over the alien symbols. The crystalline structures around them pulsed in response, and a new hologram appeared, displaying a schematic of the sanctuary. Jason leaned in, studying the projection. "There," Celera said, pointing to a cluster of symbols near the hangar. "These nodes control the sanctuary's shielding and automated weapons. But they're offline." Jason cursed under his breath. "Of course they are. Can you reactivate them?" Celera hesitated, then nodded. "I think so, but it will take time." Jason straightened, his jaw set. "Then we hold them off until you're done." Celera looked at him, her eyes wide with concern. "Jason, there are too many of them. You can't fight them alone." "I won't have to," Jason said, glancing at the sanctuary schematic. "This place is full of choke points. If we play it smart, we can hold them off long enough for you to bring the defenses online." Celera's expression was torn, but she nodded. "Be careful." Jason offered a small, reassuring smile. "Always." The Odyssey's small weapons cache wasn't much, but Jason made it work. He armed himself with his plasma pistol, a modified energy rifle, and a handful of explosive charges he had rigged from spare parts. He set up traps and barricades at key points throughout the sanctuary, using the narrow corridors to his advantage. As the Nexus ships closed in, Celera worked furiously at the console, her fingers glowing with Solara energy as she interfaced with the sanctuary's systems. The crystalline structures around her pulsed faster, their light intensifying as she slowly brought the ancient defenses back online. The first wave of Nexus soldiers breached the sanctuary's outer doors minutes later. Jason met them in the main corridor, his energy rifle humming as he fired the first shot. The soldiers were heavily armed and armored, but Jason's positioning gave him the upper hand. Plasma bolts ricocheted off the walls as he picked them off one by one, using the narrow passage to funnel them into his line of fire. "Come on," he shouted, his voice echoing through the corridor. "Is that all you've got?" The second wave was more coordinated, advancing with suppressive fire that forced Jason to retreat to his next barricade. He detonated one of his makeshift charges as they pushed forward, the explosion rocking the corridor and sending debris raining down on the attackers. "Jason!" Solara's voice crackled over the comlink. "The shields are almost online, but I need more time for the weapons." "I'm working on it," Jason snapped, ducking behind cover as a plasma bolt scorched the wall above his head. In the central chamber, Solara's focus was razor-sharp. She could feel the sanctuary's systems responding to her touch, the ancient technology resonating with her Solara energy. But the strain was immense. Sweat beaded on her brow, and her hands shook as she fought to maintain the connection. Then, she felt a surge of energy unlike anything she had experienced before. The sanctuary wasn't just reacting to her, it was amplifying her power, drawing on her Solara to fuel its dormant systems. Celera gasped, her vision swimming as the connection deepened. Images flashed through her mind, her people building the sanctuary, their desperate flight from the consortium, and the final act of sealing its defenses. She realized now that the sanctuary wasn't just a refuge, it was a weapon. Jason fell back to his last barricade, his energy rifle nearly depleted. The Nexus soldiers pressed forward relentlessly, their numbers seemingly endless. He fired his last shot, then drew his plasma pistol, bracing himself for the final stand. But before the soldiers could close in, a blinding light filled the corridor. Jason shielded his eyes, his heart pounding as the soldiers froze, their weapons falling limp in their hands. The light coalesced into a shimmering barrier that surged forward, sweeping through the corridor and knocking the soldiers unconscious. Jason turned to see Celera standing at the entrance to the corridor, her entire body glowing with radiant energy. Her silver eyes burned with an intensity he had never seen before, and her presence seemed to fill the air with a tangible force. "Celera?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She stepped forward, the light around her pulsing with each movement. "The sanctuary is awake." The Nexus soldiers regrouped outside the sanctuary, their commanders barking orders as they prepared for another assault. But before they could advance, the asteroid shuddered, and massive crystalline turrets emerged from the surface, glowing with Solara energy. The turrets fired beams of concentrated light, tearing through the Nexus fleet with devastating precision. Frigates exploded in fiery bursts, and the massive cruisers struggled to evade the onslaught. Within minutes, the once formidable fleet was in full retreat, limping back into the nebula. Inside the sanctuary, Jason watched the holographic display with a mix of awe and relief. "You did it," he said, turning to Celera. Celera nodded, her glow fading slightly as she approached him. "We did it." Jason smiled, but his relief was short-lived. "This won't stop them, will it? The consortium won't give up?" "No," Celera said, her voice heavy with certainty, "but they will think twice before attacking again." Jason exhaled, his mind racing with possibilities. "So what now?" Celera hesitated, then placed a hand on his shoulder. "I need to rebuild. If there are other Saranthii out there, I have to find them. We can't keep running, we have to fight back." Jason met her gaze, his own determination mirrored in her silver eyes. "You won't have to do it alone." Solara's expression softened. "Jason, you've already risked so much for me. I can't ask you to dash." "You're not asking," Jason interrupted. "I'm offering. The consortium isn't just your enemy, they're everyone's. And besides," he smirked, "I kind of like the company." Solara's lips curved into a small, genuine smile. "Then we stand together." As the sanctuary's systems settled into a steady hum, Jason and Celera stood side by side, gazing out at the swirling colors of the nebula. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Together, they would face whatever came next, bound by the light of the Solara and the unyielding resolve to protect what remained of Solara's people.